I'm just going to go through the frequently asked questions. Is this racial separatism? No, this is about demographic majority, not racial separatism. Israel provides the relevant precedent. Jewish people created a state where they hold majority control after centuries of persecution, but Israel includes, y'all, I'm not trying to, I'm just talking about political power. I'm not trying to defend the state of Israel and what they're doing to the Palestinians. So I hope you guys don't think that's what I'm doing here. I'm just talking about how you seize power. I'm not going to get into that whole. I've already talked about this at length about how the state of Israel was formed. Um, I'm just talking about the motivations and how you actually get power. Similarly, an 80 West controlled Mississippi would welcome all residents who contribute positively to the community while ensuring 80 West political leadership. This isn't about creating an all-black state or excluding other populations. It's about having one state in the United States with an 80 West majority, which is entirely reasonable given that the 80 West represent 13% of the national population, but have never controlled any state government. We're seeking majority political control in one state out of 50, not racial segregation. How will this affect current non-80 West residents? Current residents who contribute positively to the communities will benefit from improved governance, economic development, and infrastructure investment. The economic development programs target historically disadvantaged areas, which means all residents in these areas will benefit from business development, job creation, and infrastructure improvement. Non-80 West residents will experience better schools, safer communities, economic opportunities, and more effective government services. The goal is to demonstrate that 80 West can govern more effectively than current establishments, which benefits everyone regardless of their background. Those who oppose community development or engage in discriminatory behavior would face consequences, but law-abiding residents who support community development will prosper. Why is sovereignty more important than cash reparations? Cash reparations don't address systemic oppression. They only provide temporary individual relief while leaving the oppressive systems intact. Sovereignty addresses root causes by giving 80 West complete control over all three branches of government: executive, legislative, and judiciary. This isn't about controlling police department. It's about having complete sovereignty over every institution that affects 80 West lives. With executive control, we appoint state agency heads, control state police, and direct government enforcement priorities. With legislative control, we write the laws, set budgets, and determine policy priorities. With judicial control, we interpret laws, oversee criminal justice, and ensure constitutional protections are actually enforced. Judicial control is particularly crucial because the judiciary issues law licenses and controls entry into the legal profession. We can remove the barriers to entry and ensure the legal system represents and reflects its current population. When 80 West control the courts, we eliminate the biased licensing scheme that exclude qualified 80 West lawyers, judges, and legal professionals, while ensuring that our communities have legal representation that understands and advocates for our interests. Police brutality continues because 80 West don't control police departments or the prosecutors who refuse to charge killer cops or the judges who dismiss cases or the legislators who write qualified immunity laws. That's a mistake. It wasn't the legislature who did it. It was actually the fucking Supreme Court. But they uphold it, and they refuse to address it. Educational failure persists because 80 West don't control school boards or state education departments or legislatures that underfund schools or courts that allow discriminatory discipline policies. Economic discrimination continues because 80 West don't control businessing, licensing boards, or government contracting offices or courts that dismiss discrimination lawsuits or legislatures who write laws protecting discriminatory practices. Cash reparations would still leave 80 West subject to oppressive state governments that control every institution affecting our lives. We would remain vulnerable to police violence, educational neglect, economic exploitation, and judicial bias because we would still lack the power to control the executive agencies that enforce laws, the legislatures that write the laws, and the courts that interpret laws. Complete sovereignty eliminates oppression by transferring control of all oppressive institutions to 80 West communities. When we control the entire state government, we control every mechanism of power that currently oppresses us. This is about total institutional control, not partial reform. How will an ADOS controlled state be governed differently? The critical difference is governance philosophy. If ADOS simply replicate existing oppressive systems, we'll achieve the same oppressive results regardless of who's in charge. The goal is creating limited government that advocates ADOS interests while respecting individual rights, not creating new forms of paternalistic control. The principle is proportionality. Government authority must be balanced with government responsibility. If government wants to regulate private conduct, it must provide social services that make regulation legitimate. Don't regulate abortion without providing comprehensive health care, child care, and family support. Don't criminalize drug use without providing treatment and rehabilitation services. Don't require professional licensing without ensuring equal access to education and certification. Government has champagne chased with beer money. It wants extensive control without assuming corresponding responsibilities. An ADOS controlled state would reject this approach. Either government provides comprehensive services that justify its authority or limit its authority to match its actual capacity to serve citizens. Is this legal? Yes. The constitutional right to travel and democratic participation are fundamental rights. The Free State Project established clear precedent for coordinated political migration. Any attempt to prevent ADOS political participation would violate federal civil rights laws and constitutional protection. How much will this cost individual families? Many families would save money. The median Mississippi home costs are $130,000 versus $400,000 in major metropolitan areas. Lower cost of living, no state income tax on military retirement, and economic opportunities in a growing state creates financial advantages. Community investment funds and business development programs will support families during transition. What about federal government opposition? This strategy operates within existing constitutional frameworks. Federal opposition would require violating constitutional rights to travel and vote, creating legal and political problems for any administration. An ADOS controlled state would work cooperatively with federal agencies while advocating for ADOS interests through proper government channels. How do we coordinate 430,000 people? Modern digital platforms enable coordination impossible in McCabe's era. Social media, mobile apps, and online organizing tools provide unprecedented coordination capacity. The pledge system creates assurance contracts where people commit to act only as sufficient others commit, reducing individual risk while ensuring collective success. What if this fails? We have tried everything else. This deserves a try. This is something we have never done before. We have never controlled a state. Controlling a state represents a real threat to the system, which is why it will be resisted. But even if it fails, the threat of us achieving this will shake up the system and force changes that benefit ADOS regardless. This strategy is very low risk with high reward. The only way we fail is if we don't try. The risk of failure is lower than continuing current approaches. Individual cash reparations campaigns have failed for 60 years. Electoral politics with majority white jurisdictions provide token representation without meaningful power. Economic integration without political protection leaves ADOS wealth vulnerable to destruction, as occurred with Black Wall Street. Even partial success would provide more ADOS political control than currently exists anywhere in America. Counties and congressional districts under ADOS control would demonstrate effective governance while building towards state-level influence. The mere credible threat of achieving state control would force the federal government and other states to negotiate more seriously with ADOS interests than they do now. Success would create a model that could be replicated in other states with significant ADOS populations. Failure would still leave us better positioned than we are now, having built organizational capacity, demonstrated political seriousness, and forced national attention to ADOS sovereignty as a legitimate political option. Why did you write this pamphlet? I wrote this pamphlet out of frustration with systemic oppression in the absence of effective solutions to address it. Through careful analysis, I concluded that sovereignty represents the essential prerequisite for escaping oppression and achieving genuine political power. I became increasingly disillusioned with those who articulate valid criticisms of existing systems while failing to propose actionable alternatives. This pamphlet represents my attempt to bridge that gap between analysis and implementation. My hope is that readers will not merely consume these ideas, but recognize their practical viability and take concrete steps towards implementation. This work draws intellectual inspiration from three primary sources: Theodore Herzl's The Jewish State, Edward P. McKay's visionary attempt to establish a Black state in Oklahoma, and the contemporary success of the Free State Project in New Hampshire. How will you protect freedom and individual rights? I will call for a state version of the Ninth Amendment to the United States Constitution. However, this will have stricter enforcement. Our rights do not come from the government. The Ninth Amendment is a rule of construction. The government does not create rights. The Constitution is only enumeration of certain rights, but we retain all rights we had under common law. Rights which are not enumerated will still be protected. The state will have no general police powers. The state will only be able to act based on express authority. No branch of government will be able to act based on unenumerated general police powers. Rules by the judiciary will not be able to change substantive law simply by passing rules while claiming inherent authority. Individual rights belong to individuals and will not be put to a public vote. The government will exist to protect life, liberty, and property. It will have limited authority and will not control its citizens like children. The guiding principle will be the principle of self-ownership. You own your life and you own your body. Controlling this state will be a means of protecting individual sovereignty. What will the economic model look like? The goal will be to have an economy which is self-sufficient and self-sustainable. The objective will be to have strong local economies which can sustain themselves without relying on the federal government and can withstand disruptions in the global market. We should produce our own goods and services locally while also exporting goods to other states and nations. Key challenges that need to be addressed include education and workforce development to ensure residents have skills for emerging industries, infrastructure improvement and transportation, broadband and utilities to support business development, access to capital for startups and small businesses, particularly for ADOS entrepreneurs. Brain drain the prevention by retaining college graduates through attractive career opportunities. The focus will be on building diverse economic sectors, agriculture, manufacturing, technology, and services that can provide employment across skills level while creating wealth that stays within the community rather than being extracted by outside interests. How will professional licensing be different in an ADOS controlled state? Current occupational licensing schemes are facially race neutral but have a disparate impact on ADOS, systematically excluding us from lucrative professions even after obtaining required education. These licensing requirements often rely on culturally biased examinations and subjective character and fitness evaluations that bear little relation to professional competence but serve as gatekeeping mechanisms. The establishment claim to want a meritocracy, but the only valid meritocracy is the free market where success depends on one's ability to serve consumers effectively. Occupational licensing is not a meritocracy. It is a state preference in which government bureaucrats determine winners and losers rather than allowing market forces to reward competence. Through regulation, states destroy people's lives by preventing qualified individuals from practicing their chosen professions based on arbitrary criteria that have nothing to do with their ability to serve customers. The real goal of occupational licensing is not to protect the public, but to create artificial scarcity of services in order to engage in economic protectionism. for current practitioners. What economists call rent-seeking behavior. This benefits the dominant society by allowing them to charge higher prices due to reduced competition, but it also harms ADOS communities because we lack access to these services due to artificially inflated costs. When licensing boards restrict the number of practitioners, they drive up prices while reducing service availability. This creates a dual harm. ADOS professionals are excluded from lucrative fields, while ADOS communities pay higher prices for services or go without them entirely. The system protects incumbent practitioners' profits at the expense of both aspiring professionals and consumers who need affordable prices. An ADOS controlled state would reform professional licensing to focus on actual competency rather than artificial barriers. We would use psychometrically validated assessments that demonstrate content validity and criterion reliability, meaning the test actually measures skills needed for professional practice rather than cultural knowledge unrelated to job performance. However, standardized testing would not be the only factor in licensing decisions. We would also consider how applicants plan to serve community needs, the commitment to addressing underserved populations, and their understanding of local community challenges. This holistic approach ensures that licensing professionals contribute to community development rather than simply extracting wealth from communities they don't understand or serve. The goal is eliminating barriers that exclude qualified ADOS professionals while maintaining standards that protect public life and ensuring affordable access to essential services. Current licensing boards often use discretionary authority to exclude ADOS applicants through pre-textual character evaluations while accepting less qualified candidates who fit cultural expectations. Reform licensing would focus on demonstrated competence and community service rather than subjective assessments that perpetuate exclusion and artificial scarcity. Is this giving special treatment to ADOS? No. This is about general economic development that happens to benefit ADOS due to demographic population. The programs target economically distressed areas, rural communities, and historically underperforming districts, not race-specific categories. Since ADOS are concentrated in these areas due to historical settlement patterns and discriminatory policies, they benefit disproportionately from race-neutral economic development policies. These are the same types of programs that already exist nationwide: rural development, small business support, infrastructure investment in underserved areas, and educational funding for low-performing districts. The difference is that an ADOS-controlled state would prioritize these programs and ensure they effectively reach the communities that need them most. All residents in targeted areas will benefit from improved infrastructure, better schools, business development opportunities, and enhanced government services. The programs don't exclude anyone based on race. They include everyone in economically disadvantaged areas while addressing the geographic legacy of historical discrimination. Who do you expect will oppose this project? Those most likely to oppose this will be members of our own community, the grifters and the charlatans. They are not interested in liberating our people. They are interested in their own individual gains at our expense. They will not support this project. Instead, they will tell you to continue begging for cash reparations, knowing it won't happen, and without coming up with an actual plan to achieve it. Don't trust these people. They profit from keeping ADOS communities dependent and hopeless because it maintains their position as middlemen who claim to speak for us while delivering nothing. These individuals will not want to be part of the hard work of building sovereignty, but if we make this happen without them, they will try to join in later while asking for their cut after all the difficult organizing was done without their help. They will attempt to position themselves as leaders of a movement they oppose when it requires sacrifice and commitment. Real liberation requires rejecting these false prophets who have led our communities in circles for decades. They offer complaints without solutions, demands without strategy, and rhetoric without results. The Black State Project threatens their grift because it offers concrete action that would make their performative activism obsolete. This is why the project must be led by serious people committed to actual results rather than those who profit from perpetual grievance without resolution. The test of genuine leadership is willingness to do the work when success is uncertain, not jumping on board after others have proven the concept works. Won't this create backlash? Any AWS investment creates backlash from those who benefit from oppression. The advantage of this approach is constitutional protection and federal legal frameworks that make violent oppression difficult. Unlike McCain's era, federal civil rights laws, voting rights protections, and hate crime legislation provide legal tools that did not exist in the 1890s. Successful governance and economic development in AWS controlled areas would demonstrate competence while building political support from residents who benefit from effective leadership regardless of their racial background.